Oh yeah! Streets of Rage 4 is officially happening. Let me tell you, I was psyched as hell when I watched the official trailer. I've probably watched it at least 20 times. The first 10 were to convince myself I wasn't dreaming, and the next 10 were to make sure this wasn't just a fan-made video. Nope, we are actually getting Streets of Rage 4. This is one of those sequels that fans like myself have hoped to see for years, but probably all but given up hope of actually seeing. Even though the series has a pretty committed fan base and is widely considered the best beat-em-up series of the 90s, a sequel has never truly been produced for over 2 decades. Not for lack of trying though. The 3D action game Fighting Force was going to be a Streets of Rage sequel, but Sega pulled the licensing rights when the developers wanted to port it to non-Sega consoles. For decades there's been leaks and rumors about the game happening, and there's even been a couple of alpha pitches that got rejected. Now that it's happening, I can't wait to see how this turns out. And this actually isn't childhood nostalgia speaking. I didn't actually get to play this series as a kid. It was at least 10 years before I got to play any of these games. Despite how old the games were when I first played them, I agree with those who proclaim this to be one of the greatest series of fighting games. And Streets of Rage 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. Why is Streets of Rage so great? Well, to put it simply, it has great visuals, absolutely stellar music, and incredible gameplay that is accessible yet much deeper than it initially appears. These games are so simple on the surface, but have layers to their fighting mechanics that got deeper with every game, making them much more compelling than your average arcade-style brawler. Okay, so after the initial excitement from this reveal, I have toned down my anticipation to that of cautious optimism. Let's be realistic for a moment, this could go either way. The final project could be awesome, but it could also end up being a dumpster fire. At this point there's very little to actually go on. I mean, the first trailer gives like 5 seconds of actual gameplay to work with. What it does show is that the two main characters, Axel and Blaze, are returning, and the basic fighting mechanics look like they're going to be similar. So far, that's promising. The developers have also listed a few things that are to be expected in the game, including classic beat-em-up gameplay with enhanced mechanics. Now, if that's truly the direction they go with, I think the game's going to be awesome. Honestly, that's what I've always wanted from a new Streets of Rage game. At the heart of it, I think one of the things that made Streets of Rage such an amazing series is the fact that each title built upon the last, keeping the foundation intact but expanding upon it for a fresh experience. With each game, the series got a little bit quicker, a little bit more intense, and a little bit more detailed in its mechanics. That's exactly how a series ought to progress. Neither sequel feels like you're playing the exact same game with different levels, but you can tell they're all connected. For this reason, the idea of classic gameplay with new mechanics sounds perfect, because that's what the original trilogy already did with each installment. They've also implied that the new game's going to feature a new story, which frankly I'm on board with. I've heard some people claim that Mr. X is a staple and that he needs to be included as the antagonist, but really, I feel it's time to move forward from that beaten horse. We've taken down Mr. X 3 times already. The last time he was a frickin' brain in a jar. If he returns again, he's going to be the Michael Myers of video games. I'd much rather see our heroes have to face new gangs and criminal leaders looking to invade their city. It would just feel like a natural progression. After all, everything so far implies this is a true sequel and not simply a remake or remaster. I really believe it's time for our ex-cop vigilantes to face some new challenges. Now that's not to say that there can't be references to Mr. X, and hell, I could see the other antagonist, Shiva, making a return in some way. Given that Shiva is designed as a rival to the heroes, his involvement would actually make more sense. Really, I'm just saying that the whole shtick of Mr. X has returned to conquer the city once again is retreading old ground a bit too much. Let's see something new to make it feel like the games are actually moving forward. Now, a humongous topic regarding this game is that composer Yuzo Koshiro must return to create the soundtrack. Seriously, like 75% of the comments regarding this game are people saying that Yuzo's involvement needs to be confirmed. I wholeheartedly agree. The music is one of the most iconic parts of the series, and Yuzo made some absolutely legendary tracks in this series. Just listen to some of this music. Now, if for some godforsaken reason Yuzo isn't making the soundtrack, it's not a complete deal breaker. I'll probably still buy the game. I'm just saying it'll probably feel like something big is missing if Yuzo's compositions aren't there, and if any other composer is going to have tough shoes to fill. That being said, the fact that Yuzo hasn't said anything yet is promising actually. If he wasn't involved, he wouldn't be legally barred from confirming or denying his involvement. But yeah, fingers crossed that he's on board. Now let's talk about the graphical style from what the trailer shows. Oh boy, this has been a bit of a talking point. It's actually kind of strange. A lot of the videos and articles I've seen actually talk about how they think it's a neat aesthetic and it's kind of cool looking. Some have even compared it to Comix Zone, another 16-bit fighting game from Sega. And that's actually kind of a fair comparison. On the other hand, a lot of the comments I've seen, they talk about how it resembles a trashy mobile Flash game or something. Me, I'm neutral in all honesty. I would have liked 16-bit pixel art for sure, but I don't really see how these 5 seconds of video make the game look like trash automatically. A lot of people insist that Streets of Rage is known for being gritty, dark, and realistic, and then this art direction is simply too colorful. Honestly, I think some people are not really remembering the series accurately. True, the series can be pretty dark and gritty at times with its levels placed in back alleys, and the third game focusing on the threat of an entire city getting nuked. But if you'll also remember, this is also the series where you have a 12-year-old kid fighting street gangs on rollerblades, you fight a boxing kangaroo and his circus trainer, and the final boss of the third game ends up being a robot controlled by a brain. Now, I'm not saying these things are bad at all. They actually are kind of cool. Just don't act like this series is completely rooted in realism. Really, the dark atmosphere to me more so comes from the fact that most of the game is actually set, well, in the dark. The first 2 games take place almost entirely at night until the end of the game, and even the third game seems to be placed more in the evening. The whole pixelated art style isn't what makes the game feel dark and gritty. I mean, the Final Fight games on Super Nintendo have pixelated graphics, and those games aren't exactly known for being dark and gritty. And from what we've seen so far, whether it's trailer footage or gameplay footage, it seems to take place at night in dark areas. What I'm trying to say is the game can still overall have a dark feel to it, even if it kind of has a comic book art direction. Let me state this as well. I'm not expecting this game to surpass the originals. There seems to be a bit of a mentality that if a sequel doesn't surpass its predecessors, then it automatically sucks. And frankly, that's a bit unfair. I do expect Streets of Rage 4 to carry the Streets of Rage legacy on with dignity, but I also plan to judge the game on its own merits. It can fall short of the series' pinnacle that was Streets of Rage 2, but still be a great game. That's truly all I expect from this game, in all honesty. A game that feels like Streets of Rage and is fun to play. So let me conclude this video by saying that while details are still vague, I'm hopeful for this game. PAX West 2018 apparently featured a demo behind closed doors, and from what I've seen, the opinion is that while it's still in the early stages of development, the game plays like its predecessors. To hear that from people who've played an early demo, that's promising. Everything is pointing towards this being a true sequel that plays in a similar fashion to the classics. And really, that's what Streets of Rage 4 needs to be. A modern take on that kick-ass beat-em-up action we all loved. So let's wait and see what happens.